Afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. We made it through another week. We had real life football on TV yesterday. Thank you so much for joining me. I am Britt Flinn, your host of Britt's Fantasy Blitz. Guys, as always, thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with me. And it is National Beer Day. So thank you for spending your Friday getting blitzed with me on National Beer Day. As always, please put your comments, your questions, anything you want to get out in the ether in the chat. And while you're there, hit the like and subscribe button. That's like Howard Bender says, that's how we feed our families. So we've got a very busy show today. There's a ton going on throughout the NFL. I was updating the show sheet just up until the very last minute. We're going to be talking about top news around the NFL, including reactions to the Hall of Fame game last night, which could anybody make any more darkness retreat jokes? That it went overboard, guys. It went overboard. We'll also be talking about our player debate series over at fantasyalarm.com. This topic or this player of this topic today is Calvin Ridley, put on masterfully by Colby Conway and Kevin Tompkins. So we'll be getting to that. But since it is Friday and since it is National Beer Day, we're also going to be joined by a very special guest for Fantasy Friday Happy Hour. Our guest, Brian Drake, host of 2 Point Stance podcast on Fantasy Points, the FF Hustle with Dwayne McFarland, a SiriusXM fantasy football host, and a two-time FSWA nominee. And for Fighting Chance Fantasy, one of my mentors, somebody who got me in the space. Cannot wait to have him on and parse out just some little light topics and possibly the Eagles. Ugh. If you guys know, I'm a huge Cowboys fan, and talking about the Eagles, I'm getting it out early. I'm getting it done early, and I would have nobody else to talk about it with than Brian Drake. So let's get to some news here. Like I said, the Hall of Fame game was last night, and there were definitely some takeaways. Zach Wilson kind of looked decent. I wouldn't say that he looked like the number 2 overall pick, but he definitely looked improved from what he did last season. And that's making me think that Aaron Rodgers is already having an effect on him as a mentor. The 157-yard throw was just so beautiful. So I think if Wilson improves, he could still have a future in New York. We know that Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be there for very much longer. He's on the older side, the downside. We weren't even sure if he was going to stay after this season. So maybe Zach Wilson, with the correct tutelage, could get some work with the New York Jets eventually. Moving on. Hi, everybody in the chat. Hi, Ann. Hi, Club Fantasy. Hi, Skinny. I'm with you. It's National Beer Day. Don't mind if I do. It is 107 degrees, so beer is extra refreshing when it's that hot outside. Flipping to the other side of the ball, the Cleveland Browns quarterback, Kellen Mond, he looks like doo-doo. He was a 2021 third-round pick, but he went 13 for 19 with 92 yards and a touchdown, but he did have a very bad interception. And honestly, if you watch the game, a lot of those completions were just to the running backs and very little downfield looks. He didn't go through his reads. He was pressured a ton. Rookie Dorian Thompson-Robinson, however, looked dynamic, finishing 8 of 11, 82 yards, a touchdown, and he tacked on 36 additional rushing yards. We'll talk more later with our guest, Brian Drake, about his reaction to the Hall of Fame game, but my initial gut reaction is that DTR looked the best out of every quarterback last night, not just the Browns quarterbacks, but every single quarterback on that field. Seeing that little shimmy and how well he sold the fakes with his rushing ability, yeah, he's going to be something. He's going to be good. It's also of note that if the Browns offense operates in the same way that they did last night, that there are going to be a ton of screens to the running back. And that means Nick Chubb to the moon. You love to see it. We've already known that he is one of the best pure rushers in the entire league. And everybody's gripe about him has been, well, he doesn't catch passes. Kareem Hunt's not there anymore. If he gets incorporated into this passing game the way that the backups were last night, he's going to explode. And I cannot wait for that. Cue a shameless Chubb joke. So, moving on to some more NFL news, let's get away from this Hall of Fame game so I don't take all the talking points away from Brian. Cooper Cup is day to day with the hamstring injury, which is good. Offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur doesn't expect him to miss any real playing time, which is great news for fantasy managers who've already drafted him. But I want to make a point here and say this is why we should not be drafting this early. Okay, I get it with Scott Fishbowl. I get it with some charity leagues. But the home leagues, the dynasty startups, all of those leagues who are drafting this early, what are you doing? We get bit by this every single year. You had Travis Etienne 2 years ago. This year, we've already seen Kadarius Toney go down. Even some of these running backs that we've been drafting lose their fantasy value in the upcoming weeks with the signing of the multi free agent running backs on the market. If Dalvin Cook signs with the Jets, how are y'all going to feel who drafted Brees Hall? I mean, yes, I understand that players can get hurt anytime, but you at least want to see them make it through camp first. And I'll end it on this. It's very interesting to note, and I did see this on Reddit, so take it with a grain of salt. But something like 60% of the players who get injured during camp finish below their ADP. So it's something to think about. All you guys who have some pull in your home leagues, let's get that draft as close to the start of the season as possible so we don't have to deal with that. There's also an update on the ongoing Jonathan Taylor saga, with some Colts executives apparently open to trading him. Taylor is also frustrated with the Colts medical management and their handling of, quote, past and present injuries. Taylor has been steadfast in his resolve to get traded. And while he still remains on the pup list, do you think the Colts should play hardball or just let him go? You can let me know in the chat. I'm of the opinion that they just need to pay him. I think that he's the best player on their team, and letting him go would be extremely stupid. But it's also extremely stupid to make your best player this disgruntled when you have the opportunity to extend him, to give him a little bit of money, to make him happy, to make him feel safe in this space and with this offense. The whole thing is just very, very puzzling to me. So we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. New Falcons cornerback Jeff Okudah suffered a lower leg injury in practice this morning, and he was carted off. It has been confirmed that it is an ankle injury, although we don't know the extent of it. But Okudah, who was suspiciously inactive last year in Week 18 against the Panthers, was traded to the Falcons, but it was speculated that he was traded due to a medical issue. Now, if this injury is serious, Atlanta may be back in the same boat as they were with their secondary and their defense as a whole. And that's putting so much pressure on Desmond Ridder, who they expect to take the second year leap, Bijan Robinson to just explode as this top 10 rookie. I had very high hopes for them looking at their defense and what they brought in. And now I'm just not so sure. In other defensive news, the Bears have signed former Pro Bowler Yannick Ngakoue to a one-year deal worth $10.5 million. I think this is a great signing for them. The Bears ranked dead last in pressure grade last season, according to PFF. So adding some depth to their pass rush is a great move. Seattle's rookie running back Zach Charbonnet is back at practice just 2 days after Pete Carroll said he's out indefinitely. That's great news for the rookie. But is Carroll playing games with us as fantasy managers? We're told that Charbonnet is out indefinitely, which with Kenneth Walker, he's still on the sidelines. I mean, it apparently means he's fine. But Kenneth Walker is told that they are exercising caution with him and he's not been back to practice. It's just a very messy situation for fantasy football fans, especially as we gear up and get closer to our redraft leagues. We still have no idea how that depth chart is going to shake out, how the carries are going to be split, or how either running back looks in this system, especially with Kenneth Walker coming back from injury. Just quit playing games with us, Pete. Just quit it. Sticking with the Seahawks, it was also revealed that Geno Smith apparently texted Pete Carroll on draft night saying that we have to draft Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's also been kind of a polarizing player in redraft leagues, with some people relying on just his pure talent and athleticism to supplant Tyler Lockett, But on the other side, people believe that he'll have to take his time to learn the system and that he'll be the odd man out in two wide receiver sets. This news, in my opinion, might elevate the hype machine a little, but I still don't know if JSN will outright replace Lockett and bump him down the depth chart. I think that there's a give and take that we need to look at here. And I think that honestly, it's going to take some time to learn that system, to get a rapport with Geno Smith. Um, Lockett is still available at a huge discount at ADP. So even if JSN does eat into its target share, it's built into the draft cost. We still need to be taking Tyler Lockett over JSN in redraft leagues. And Kelly, I'm so glad that you're here. I have no idea what time zone I'm in, but you're staying for me. Girl, love you. So some minor news here. It looks like Darren Waller may have dislocated his finger during practice. A trainer popped it back in, but it did give us a scare for a player who has missed 13 games in the past 2 seasons. It's definitely something to watch and see if it becomes more serious, especially as the news came out that Waller was traded from the Raiders because they were concerned about his durability and his injury history. We did see a lot of Paris Campbell in training camp today, so take that for what it's worth. I know that the Giants are an elephant graveyard of slot receivers, but maybe they just decided to pull Waller out as a precaution. Just keep your eye on that. I know he's going decently high as far as tight ends go, and it would really be a blow if he were to miss some time. So, some minor news wrapping up here. And Michael, I do agree with you. Lockett is the most underrated player in fantasy football every year. I think I just got him in the 8th round of a super flex. I mean, the 8th round, guys, he finished. Yeah, come on. Stop overlooking Lockett. Just stop it. All right, getting to the minor news. Tight end Mercedes Lewis signed with the Bears. This contract will make him tied for the longest tenured or longest career tight end in the league. Not sure if he has any impact on the fantasy community, but he's definitely, he's going to be out there as a blocker. He's a big boy, and the Bears need all the help they can get. Cam Jordan and the Saints agreed to a 2-year extension, probably meaning that Cam Jordan is going to retire with the same team he was drafted by, which is a huge rarity. Great testament to him as a player. He's still going to have an impact. It's great to hear that he's going to stay with the Saints. In some kind of scandalous news, the Titans waived potential right tackle starter Jamarco Jones after multiple fights at practice. This is another blow to an already depleted offensive line. Then after they waived him, you had Mike Vrabel coming out today saying that Chigakonkwo needed to work on his pass blocking. I know that Andrew Cooper covered this in the show previously before me, Coop's Fantasy Fiasco. We were so high on Chigakonkwo coming into the season, but then DeAndre Hopkins got signed. They lost one of their linemen to a gambling suspension. Now they lost a potential starter just because he couldn't keep his head together at training camp. I think that Chig is going to have to block purely based out of necessity. So that is something to watch for sure. Titans, Treylon Burks, let's go. Just manifesting it into existence. Javonte Williams, Denver Broncos running back, is expected to play in the preseason. We normally don't put a lot of stock into preseason games, but for a running back coming off such a severe knee injury, it is very encouraging news, and it will give us an idea of how he's progressing in rehab. I think the Dogs are excited about Javonte as well. In irrelevant news, and how will this affect Marlon Mack? Well, Marlon Mack signed with the Arizona Cardinals today. I think it's just a depth piece signing, but it should give you some clues about how Arizona feels about their running back room outside of James Conner. Matt Ryan was also present at Falcons practice today. One day after they waived backup Felipe Franks, another Arkansas alum, leading to speculation that he could be re-signed as a potential backup to Desmond Ridder. Do I think this will happen? No. I think Matt Ryan's done. I think he needs to stay at home and just do that. But if it were to come down to, signing a one-day contract before he retired, I think that's more than likely what's going on. Finally, Aaron Rodgers was on the sideline at the Hall of Fame game last night. He was touting Garrett Wilson like crazy, saying that Garrett Wilson even reminded him of Devontae Adams. Rodgers has been historically averse to younger receivers, but it is very promising that he's already heaping this type of praise on the Jets wide receiver one. So that's our news for today. If anything comes down through the wire, our producer, Ernie Acosta, will let us know. But we have so many training camp news and injury updates already over on fantasyalarm.com as part of the draft guide. The draft guide is what we call a living draft guide. It is updated continuously. I cannot tell you how many times I'm running back to that training camp or off-season injury report and updating it as soon as I get any little bit of news. We're not going to leave you out here to dry. We're going to give you the most updated information so that when you do draft, hopefully late, and your commissioners take my advice and draft closer to the season, that you have the most up-to-date information as possible. To purchase the draft guide, go to fantasyalarm.com/draft. And, DraftKings and a couple other companies have released their week 1 slates. So if you want some DFS advice, go a little bit further. Sign up for our All Pro subscription. You can start out with a 7-day free trial, take it for a test run, see how you like it. And it's for all sports. It's for everything. You get all our tools, all our playbooks. You get access to our Discord. And when I say all sports, I mean all sports. Our MMA writer took down a GPP on Saturday. We've got everything. We've got WNBA, MMA, NASCAR, everything that you can think of. So if you're interested in trying that, sign up for the Fantasy Alarm All Pro subscription, get a 7-day free trial, take it for a test run. And, if you're just a seasonal player, sign up for the draft guide. It's really a win-win either way you go. But I want to bring my guest in here because this is somebody who I definitely have a lot of thanks to give that I haven't necessarily talked about. This guy's one of my first mentors, just an amazing creator in the fantasy space. Guys, we've got Brian Drake on here for Fantasy Happy Hour. Brian, how are you?
Well, Britt, thank you so much for having me. This is amazing to see you with your own show here. I know how tough it is to sit here and just talk into the abyss, into a microphone by yourself. It's daunting. People think, oh, you just sit there and talk fantasy football all day. Try talking into a microphone, staring back at yourself in the monitor, while you're just reading things. It's difficult, like, wait, did I just read that? Does this sound right? Like, you're doing such a great job. I'm so proud of you. And all the guys who have gone on, guys figuratively, from Fighting Chance Fantasy, and I love the work you're doing with Kevin Tompkins. I see you guys, you're doing Pros versus Joe's draft. Are you going to be out at the expo in a week?
I am going to be at the expo. Sellers won't make it, unfortunately. He's got to take care of the animals.
Oh.
So, which are coincidentally who I practice these speeches on because they don't talk back. So I can just practice talking to myself basically, and they make it work. But yeah, I'll be out there. I'm super excited. I'll be actually competing in the Queen's Classic this year, which is new.
I saw that. Very cool.
Yeah, super stoked about that after nearly taking down the King's Classic. Nearly. I finished in 3rd, and had I advanced the semifinal week, the actual final week, I took down everybody. I was point leader. So I was this close to taking down the entire King's Classic.
This is how good a little site like Fighting Chance Fantasy, who we kind of all started at. If you guys out there don't know, I know, now you're on to big, amazing things, the Fantasy Alarm and whatnot, but at the King's Classic, I and Kevin, we represent Fighting Chance, which, kind of where we all got our start. Kevin won his auction division. I won the regular season and lost by 2 points in the finals of my snake division, which would have been the first time ever someone from one site took down both divisions. And you just nearly won your Jim Brown division just from a little site that no one ever heard of or talks about, Fighting Chance Fantasy. So I'm super proud of where we all came from and seeing where everybody is gone now these days. It's really incredible. I can't believe a week from now we're going to be cracking beers in Canton, Ohio, and joining the fellowship of fantasy football. It's going to be such an experience. I look forward to it. My wife, let me lay this on you, Britt. Last night, sitting here with the kids, I come back from my golf league. She's like, "What if the kids and I come with you to Canton?" What? What are you talking about? She's like, "Yeah, I think me and the kids might come. We'll find stuff to do while you're there for the weekend." I go Thursday, Friday, Saturday. My liver hates me after this
Yeah.
week. I'm like, I don't know if you're gonna find a lot to do there. You might want to stay home. She's like, "What do you do out there? Why is it something that we can't go to? We want to see the Hall of Fame." I'm like, as a woman, Britt, explain to me, how can I tell my wife, I love you, I love the kids, but this ain't your weekend at Great Wolf Lodge.
I knew you brought up a great story about the McDonald's next to the DoubleTree. Just tell her how gross the McDonald's is.
Oh my God,
Um,
I forgot about that place. I tried to block it from my memory.
yeah, I think if you just tell her how gross the McDonald's is, that's gonna dissuade from any long-term stay. Because I remember you telling me about that McDonald's because I was starving.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys from Front Yard Fantasy who were coming up after me were going around doing these silly trivia questions. And they're like, your prize is a day old McDonald's cheeseburger. And that happened. And then literally 30 minutes later, I talked to you about how gross that McDonald's was.
Oh,
And I was like, nope, I can't.
I was so hungover, and I had to get to the Kings Classic draft. So I was waiting to get a ride over with Kevin Tompkins and Drew Davenport, and I got to eat something. I'm dying here, and I'm the one guy in America who eats the McDonald's breakfast burrito. So, I waddle myself over there, and I get in line, and I just look around. I'm like, I think some of these people slept here. I'm sticking to the floor. You ever go to a club and you're kind of walking through the dance floor, and it's like you're sticking to
Mhm.
the dance floor? That's how this McDonald's was at 10 a.m. So it probably wasn't cleaned that day or any day that ends in Y.
No, no. Former and present bartender here. Yes, I get that sticky floor mess. The party just keeps rolling, baby.
They need a bar rescue at that McDonald's.
That would be something. But yeah, I think that that's your out in getting the wife there.
That's
Um
what I'm gonna go with, because the
yeah,
kids love
just
McDonald's. I spend half my salary on chicken McNuggets. So
well, as you should. They are delicious. They are an American staple for a reason. But we're
mhm.
not here to talk about fast food. We're here to talk about football. And I think something that you brought up is so pertinent. So many people don't know that we all got our start at this little bitty site called Fighting Chance Fantasy. And
Mhm.
now you're out there, you've got a ton of podcasts and you're always cranking out content and you're doing this solo. So, what's been going on with you and what do you have coming up for the people who may not know you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at Drake Fantasy. I got my start at Fighting Chance with, Ryan Hallam, Steve Rappin, and all the great guys over there. I've kind of working behind the scenes, writing, podcasting. Started a pod called the Fantasy Football Hustle with my friend Dwayne McFarland for about 5 years. That blew up to the point where some guy named Matthew Berry, I'd never heard of him. He hired Dwayne away, and now Dwayne works for him at Fantasy Life. I couldn't be more proud and happy for my friend to do that. But it kind of left me in a spot where I'm like, all right, well, I can do this hustle solo as I did last year. And then I got scooped up by John Hansen, Joe Dolan, and the guys at Fantasy Points. And I've been doing pods over there called the 2 Point Stance with Joe Dolan. And I actually do a show with the guru, John Hansen, called Ask Guru Anything on the Fantasy Points YouTube. Boy, what else? And I've got something coming down. I'm just waiting. I'm refreshing my Outlook mail as we speak, waiting for a contract to come down from not a new site, but a very, very large site that's going to be getting into the fantasy space for the first time. And they're going to make me their lead fantasy writer for 2023. So these guys are either visionaries or complete morons. So we'll see how it all shakes out once the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
I cannot wait for that. This is so well deserved for somebody who, again, has been my mentor, has been so good in this fantasy space, both on radio and in print. I mean, I don't think that you realize how much you influenced me in my writing from early on. But also,
Wow.
you brought me on Sirius XM onto the PFF show,
Yep.
and that was my first appearance there. And I have no doubt that they are visionaries. You were going to crush this year. But speaking of SiriusXM, there was a segment on the Fantasy Alarm show last night, and it was Roast My Draft. So that kind
Mhm.
of made me start thinking about some of the bad picks I've made in past years
Oh, boy.
because as our drafts are coming up, all these keeper leagues, the ones who require you to keep your picks in the same round that you drafted them in, we're all looking back and reliving kind of some really bad picks that happen. So I started thinking about that. I want to know, what are some of the worst picks that you've made in fantasy or even seen?
Well, looking at the show notes, I had to start digging through my home league that I've had now for 18 years. We're legal officially in the Alcoholic Haze Fantasy League. And in 2014, I had the 11th overall pick. I took Monty Ball of the Denver Broncos. Uh, so I'm thinking, okay, Monty Ball, this guy's going to break out. He's in this great offense, blah, blah, blah. Week 1, half point PPR, he scored 15 points. I'm like, what a steal. I'm the smartest guy in this draft. Week 2, dipped down to 10. All right, well, that happens. Then he had 3. Then he had 2 points. Then he was done for the year. So he was gonzo for me. In the second round, I took Des Bryant. He was fine. And then what was I thinking, Britt? In the third round, I took Julius Thomas, who a year prior helped me win a championship in that same league for the Denver Broncos. I don't know why I was so in on Denver at this point, by the way. It's
Wrong
not like I'm some
Thomas.
fan. Yeah. I took Julius Thomas, and just an awful pick. He finished as like tight end 9 that year. Rashad Jennings was my 4th round pick from the Giants. He didn't finish in the top 25. And Nick Foles was my 6th round pick at quarterback. I don't know if Nick Foles finished 2014 in the league. Anyone who saw this draft would say, never follow this person in fantasy football because he is a complete and utter idiot. But you know what? We all have days like that. We all have drafts like that. And it's why looking back on these things helps refine your process. So I always tell people every year, go back and look at your old draft boards. If you're a commissioner or someone who keeps, the board, take a picture of it on your phone, go look back, see what you do, and also see what your friends do. If you know there's guys in your league, gals, and they always take a quarterback in the first 3 rounds, now you kind of know that. So you can kind of look at the board and go, well, I know, they're going to take, I don't know, Josh Allen here in the second round. And it might mean this guy can snake around to me. Or maybe you find a trap that you're like, you know what? I always take a running back in the first round. It's like a default, you know, Pavlov's dog. I'm on the clock. I got to take a running back, but you don't. So that's just something I don't think enough people do, is kind of self-scout their fantasy drafting.
That's absolutely right, because I did the same thing last night looking for my keepers in my big money home league. And I was looking at it and I was like, okay, started off 107, Justin Jefferson, that's okay. And then kept
Okay, that's great.
going. Right. I was super excited. I was like making fun of everybody at the end of the first round. I was like, y'all are so stupid for letting me get Jefferson.
Yeah.
But then it just went to hell. I got, I think, J.K. Dobbins in the third, Cortland Sutton in the fourth, because I was high on the Denver offense as well last season. And then you look at these guys where you have like Josh Jacobs going in the sixth, things like that, because we were all of that herd mentality that he was going to get, relegated. They weren't picking up his 5th year option. They were implementing a new offense with Josh McDaniels there. They were going to rotate a lot of things. So, yeah, I think that looking back on that is super important. And it's just, honestly, it kind of embarrassed me. I did not like looking back at that. Oh, Michael, I was a huge Monty Ball fan. Falling apart is the process. We've all been there.
Oh,
Yes, we have.
Monty
Um,
Ball. Who's going to do it to us this year? Who's this year's Monty Ball? That should be, you know what? I'm going to tweet that out in a minute.
yeah, no, I think that that's a very good question. And I think that I have an answer for you, but I'm going to wait until
Ooh.
we get to the Philadelphia preview.
Oh,
Dun, dun,
boy.
dun. So do you believe in fantasy football punishments? Because I've seen some crazy stuff out there.
I'm all for the home league as the self-titled hero of the home league. I love when people are into it. Anything that brings you and your friends together is awesome. I don't like when people have to get a tattoo or you have to do something that's really degrading. Like, I'm not for that. Like, I want it to be fun. Like you see these guys like, yeah, you got to sit in a Waffle House for 24 hours or, do a lemonade stand in your front yard, or like fun stuff like that. I'm with. I don't like when it becomes mean or things like that. Or, one thing I saw, and I would not do this, by the way, I saw where they made the person, whoever lost, it was during like the election season when we were having the presidential election. They had to, if you lost, you had to put the bumper sticker of the person that you didn't vote for on your car for the year. Like, I wouldn't do that. I'd be like, no, I kick me out of the league at this point. Like, you can't go that far with it, but boy, that's a punishment.
No, I think in Arkansas that one would actually work for me.
Oh
I would
yeah, yeah.
I
You'd
would
be
get some honks and some beep beeps, like, whatever, but, no, what made me think about this question is that I saw one on TikTok, and I think that it was the number 10 worst, so it wasn't even the worst out of all of them. You had to be on a live stream. Thank you, Michael Chasko, also for bringing this to our attention. Real-time news here, guys. Alvin Kamara is suspended for 3 games. So, kind of middle, what we were thinking. I know on a better morning, we were thinking possibly 6 games. Corey Parsons said 2, so a little bit in the middle. 3 games, I don't think is so bad. I'm gonna just kind of throw this to you, Brian. What do you think about the 3-game suspension?
I think that could be best case scenario for Alvin Kamara right there. And I know there were tweets earlier today. People are getting excited about, him getting more involved in the passing game. And that's really what we need from Alvin Kamara. He only ran, nearly ran for, I think 900 yards last year. He only ran for 2 touchdowns and he only scored 2 receiving touchdowns. So I think he was 5th among running backs in targets. When he had Drew Brees under center, he was over 100 nearly every season that he played. That's where his value really lies. I don't know if Derek Carr is the guy who can get him the ball in that situation, but it's got to be schemed that way. And maybe, they're going to say, hey, we don't want to grind him between the tackles. That's what Jamal Williams can do, and they just drafted a flashy young rookie who I'm kind of high on, and I think he's going to get a shot. But if we're drafting Alvin Kamara for our fantasy teams, you're not drafting to be your RB1. You're probably not, with a 2-game suspension, going to draft him as your RB2. But as a flex in maybe a full PPR league, down the stretch, if they utilize him the right way and say, we just want to make him a space player a la DeAndre Swift, what he's going to be in Philadelphia, now I think, we can see the best of an aging Kamara, and it'll help our fantasy teams more than him just, running into the back of his right guard.
100%. That's where his downfall was last season because that's not the type of back that he is. He and Austin Eckler have never had a 1,000-yard rushing season, yet they've still been so relevant in fantasy football because of their pass catching ability. And I think that with Jamal Williams there, he's going to fall back in that role. And I think, ADP, I've drafted him over the past couple weeks. I think I've gotten him in like the 10th round both times.
Wow.
A 10th round running back with a 3-game suspension? Yes, please sign me up for that. I will take that and just run down the home stretch feeling really good about myself.
Yeah.
So I want to move on. I want to ask you real quick, what did anything stick out to you from the Hall of Fame game last night? I know that we were all super hyped that real live football was on TV. Is there anything that you wish that you saw that you didn't, or are you just ready for the regular season to start?
My son is really getting into sports now. He just turned 11, so he was super hyped up. He's like, Dad, we got to watch the Hall of Fame game. It's football. It's back. And I'm like, slow it down, buddy. This is essentially a high school game. So the one thing, I'll give you 2 things we can take from that game. Izzy Abanikanda, the backup running back for the Jets, looked shot out of a cannon, scored a touchdown. He should be on the radar, especially you Breece Hall owners out there this season. If Breece Hall isn't ready or, kind of relapses another injury, I think Abanikanda, the rookie the Jets just drafted, could be someone who could get a lot of high leverage touches for the Jets. And also Jerome Ford didn't play for the Browns. So if you're telling me now that Nick Chubb's not going to play and Jerome Ford's not going to play, it's telling me that Jerome Ford's probably going to have a pretty good role. Is it going to be Kareem Hunt-like? I doubt it. It'll be the same, but he's valuable. He should be owned in all 12-team formats.
I love that you just said that because going back to the very early part right before the NFL draft, I was so high on Ford, and seeing him not play in that Hall of Fame game just gave me all the confirmation bias that I could ever ask for. So I'm so glad that you
Absolutely.
said that.
My taxi squads on several dynasty teams were smiling last night when they saw that.
Oh, 100%, 100%. So I want to talk the Eagles with you really fast
Sure.
because with me as a Cowboys fan, you know,
Ugh.
it's kind of rough. I kind of have a hard time talking Eagles, especially when admittedly they have done so well. Howie Roseman is a genius at GM. The talent that you guys have brought on as a team as a whole is just
Mhm.
absolutely insane. And they did make some pretty good trades and free agency moves. And you brought up DeAndre Swift and what his role was going to be in Philadelphia. I've seen multiple uh, just narratives that it was going to be Rashad Penny, that DeAndre Swift looks like the RB1 in camp. Then today it came out that Kenneth Gainwell was the guy who was getting the reps in the 2-minute drill. I mean, this backfield is just so wide open.
Mhm.
So, what are your thoughts on the Eagles' backfield with Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift?
I think the Eagles' offense is going to be great. I think week to week, you're going to have no idea who's going to score and be fantasy worthy from this backfield. And as an Eagles fan, I'll say this: I don't really want any of them. I'll just take the guy who's the latest, because the Eagles last year with Jalen Hurts under center, obviously we know Jalen Hurts is the goal line back there, and what he did with the tush push and all his, what did he have? 13 rushing touchdowns last year. The Eagles did not throw a touchdown pass to a running back last year. So, and they had good pass receivers: Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Kenny Gainwell. Two of those three are back. Now we had Swift. So I think Swift is going to be schemed up more than Miles Sanders was in the pass game. I don't think they're going to try to run him between the tackles. They know he's Mr. Glass. There's no need for that. That's why you have Penny. That's why you have, Gainwell. And that's frankly why you have Jalen Hurts also. So full PPR, if I got to draft any of those guys, I'm going to take Swift. Because remember, if you look at what Swift did last year for a team that wanted nothing to do with him, he averaged more fantasy points per game in a PPR than Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne, Miles Sanders, Kenneth Walker, Najee Harris, and Damian Pierce. He was 16th overall in points per game among running backs. He did nothing last year for fantasy. He was 43rd in rushing attempts last season. So he's just a guy, sort of like what we're talking about, the new role for Alvin Kamara. So that's what he's going to do. He's going to catch balls out of the backfield. If he falls and I can get him affordably, maybe as my third running back, fine. I'm not going out of my way to get any of those guys, though.
Well, so since last year, the Eagles literally threw the dead last number of targets to the running backs. I'm wondering your thoughts on Brian Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think with the departure of Shane Steichen that this offensive scheme changes much, or do you expect them to kind of operate the same way that they did under Steichen? Do you think Swift is actually going to have those opportunities?
I think it's still Nick Sirianni's offense. So he is still the mastermind behind it. The interesting part is going to be Brian Johnson never called plays in the NFL. So that's going to be something we're going to have to see. Remember, Sirianni, when he first got the role as head coach, he called the plays. And then a few games into the season, he gave up that job to Shane Steichen, who obviously had a great run and moved on to become a head coach. So that's going to be interesting for me to see, is this change in play caller. Do we now start targeting the running backs a little more? And from practice reports, yeah, I mean, that's why you traded a pick to get a guy like DeAndre Swift, because you want to utilize his shiftiness in space. I mean, DeAndre Swift put up 144 yards week one last year on Philadelphia. So they know what DeAndre Swift can do. I just don't think they necessarily want to see him, being fed 20 carries. That's not the player I think that he is. But yeah, I think the Eagles would be fine with that kind of talent out there on the field. It's hard to screw it up. I mean, they could have me calling plays out there like it's Madden, and with AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith, you're gonna score enough points. You'll be fine.
I love that you say it's fine, like just so casually when they're,
Yeah.
the Super Bowl runner ups. Like, they're going to be fine. It'll be
Yeah.
fine. No, they're going to be more than fine. And I hate that for you and for them.
Yeah, it's just their offense didn't cost him the Super Bowl. As my son,
Yeah.
he cried after that Super Bowl loss.
Oh,
He was bawling, and I was eerily okay with it, But I sat there and they had a 10-point halftime lead and they blew it. You didn't stop Patrick Mahomes once in the second half. The Chiefs scored every time they had the ball in the second half. That's the problem. That wasn't the offense's fault. It was the defense didn't stop them. Maybe it's the field or whatever, or the idiot defensive coordinator they had in Gannon. But that's what hurt the Eagles. At 70 sacks, most sacks in the history of the NFL. And we're going to blame the defense. But hey, in that game, that's what it is.
Yeah, it was being in Arkansas. I had a lot of Chiefs fans over here. So I was kind of in a 50-50. I didn't really care who won, but also Mahomes was just annoying me at that point in time, I think. So going to the Eagles signal caller, Jalen Hurts was runner-up in MVP voting last season, finished second in voting. This year, his MVP odds are still plus 1,200, even though nothing really changed on that offense. I think, if anything, they improved. So do you think that those MVP odds are an automatic smash for Jalen Hurts?
I mean, it's definitely a ticket that I'd want to have because it's a quarterback award. So if he doesn't win it, who else could win it? It's going to either be Mahomes, Burrow, Allen. I'll give you my sneaky pick for MVP. Tua Tagovailoa. I think the Dolphins, I know we're going to throw some flag plants later. Sneak peek to that. Dolphins win the AFC East. Tua is a top 3 finisher for NFL MVP. But can Jalen Hurts win it? Yes, because I think this year he throws more touchdown passes. And, they don't rely on his legs as much. So he's still, remember, folks, Jalen Hurts, up until this year, was a total unknown as a passer. They knew, he could chuck it deep, but his accuracy was really in question. And they weren't sure if this kid was going to be an NFL quarterback. And of course, he goes out and has a great season, gets a huge contract, and, we're off to the races. But that could really improve. Imagine if he throws 30 touchdown passes this year to go along with whatever that team does on the ground. Yeah, he's got a great shot, but it's just so tough, I think, to pry it away from Patrick Mahomes.
That is the linchpin always, right? Patty Mahomes and what he can do just because he's so flashy. But I think that Hurts definitely deserves some consideration. And looking at the schedule that they have to play, I think if you go up against the NFC East Jets and their defense specifically, which I'm very high on the Jets defense, if you can do something against them and prove against a couple of these defenses that, like, yes, I'm that dude, I'm just as good as Mahomes, then he's going to have a chance. So I know I've kept you for a little bit too long, so let's just rapid fire a couple of these questions with the Eagles. Would you rather have A.J. Brown at wide receiver 7 at an aggregate ADP of 13.94 or Devonta Smith at wide receiver 13 at an ADP of 26.91?
I would rather have A.J. Brown because with a healthy Dallas Goedert, I don't think Devonta Smith shines as much. Remember that Dallas Goedert through week 10 was tight end 4 in PPR. He was 3rd in average points per game. And he's a really good player. 8 of the first 9 weeks, he was a top 15 tight end last year before injury. So I think that that's going to take away a little bit from Devonta Smith. So give me the touchdown machine that is A.J. Brown.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I was originally leaning Smith, and then I looked at his game stats, and I was like, oh my God, his floor is so low. Like, his ceiling's super high, but unless you're in best ball, that's going to be infuriating playing him from week to week. And then speaking on Dallas Goedert, he was a little polarizing for fantasy managers in a tight end wasteland. How do you see his season shaking out?
I love Dallas Goedert. I tout him wherever I go. I actually looked up some of the Eagles' red zone numbers from last year. So if you look at 2022, now this is Dallas Goedert playing 5 fewer games than Brown and Smith. He had the same target percentage as A.J. Brown in the red zone, 21.7%. Had the highest targets per route run, only 1 fewer red zone reception than A.J. Brown, 2 less than Smith. He played 5 fewer games. So he is a guy who is also one of the first reads for the Eagles in the red zone. Only Devonta Smith had 1 more first target read than Dallas Goedert. So I'm a fan of his. I think if he can stay healthy, which he never has, he's he's Darren Waller light at this point. So he's going to be fine. I'll definitely take a shot on him. And there's so many of these young tight ends that you can grab later. The Sam Laportas, Trey McBrides. You can grab Greg Dulcich. You can get these guys late and just kind of see what happens, let them percolate on your bench. It's better to have that stud breakout tight end on your bench than on the waiver wire. Then all of a sudden they had that 1 week where Sam Laporta in week 6 goes, 7 for 110 and 2 touchdowns. And then everyone's blowing their fab on him. Just have him already stashed on the bench, knowing that he's going to be a key feature in that Lions offense.
I agree with that as well. I love Laporta. I don't buy into the rookie tight ends always suck narrative that's floating out there on Twitter. I think that you need to take the totality of their circumstances in when you're drafting these guys. These guys have a clear path to catching passes, and that's what you want in fantasy for your tight end. So let's just rapid fire these 2023 season predictions. I don't want to take too much of your time, although
I'm sitting in my basement drinking a Red Bull. I'm fine.
I'm just so happy that you came on with me. Like, this is awesome. So I saw on Twitter that you have some thoughts about Desmond Ridder, and thoughts, I mean, kind of, how do you see this Falcons offense shaking out this year? And do you think that the top guys are worth their ADP?
Oh boy. I do like Bijan Robinson. And I think if you can get him in the back half of your first round, absolutely go for it. Because number one, he's good. And number two, you look at Desmond Ridder. He was 47th in adjusted completion percentage in his four starts. 47th. That's insane. He's just not a good player. And if you look at people go, oh, Marcus Mariota was so bad. There are metrics where Desmond Ridder was worse. And then you've seen highlights already this summer where it's like Desmond Ridder throwing a dead duck up in the air. He's not an elite passer of football. I don't know why they didn't go out and try to spend a little money and get a veteran like a Derek Carr, like a Jimmy Garoppolo, because this team, their defense is better than people think. They've got a ton of weapons around them. Desmond Ridder's not the answer to this team. They're going to be middling enough in a terrible division where they're going to win 7-8 games, and then they're not going to have a chance to get one of the elite signal callers coming out this year. So they're stuck in mediocrity again. But I worry because I don't trust the play caller. So yes, I'm in on the running back Bijan Robinson in terms of Pitts or Drake London. I can kind of take it or leave it. London left a lot of people out in the cold last year. I did a Hate the Drake segment on Sirius XM. Every week, Pitts or London was on there because they scored 4 points.
Well, because as Howard Bender says, Arthur Smith loves nothing in this world more than running backs into oblivion. And that's his whole thing. Game script be damned. He did not care. He was going to run that ball. I don't know if that's more of an indictment on Mariota or Ridder, to be honest, but
they both stink.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. But so you talked about some of your favorite late round tight ends just briefly. So I'll finish on this. What are some of your flag plants and hot takes for the season? Because it is TAEK season on Twitter for fantasy.
Yeah. So I'll throw these out rapid fire for you. Cooper Kupp, if he's healthy, he's going to lead the NFL in targets. Number 2, you'll never regret drafting Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. Whatever you think about him, personally, you cringe. They will always put up numbers for you. The Packers are going to win the NFC North, and Jordan Love is going to be much more than serviceable. He is going to be a surprise top 12 quarterback in fantasy. I think Dak Prescott turns it around, has a better season that his ADP indicates. Look at the weapons around him. Brandon Cooks, and you get a healthy Gallup, CeeDee Lamb. They're not going to be as reliant on the run game. Tony Pollard's great out in space. I said Miami wins the AFC East, and Justin Herbert finishes as a top 3 QB thanks to the new OC, the healthy O-line, and the bevy of weapons that he has around him.
Oh, I love that last one so much. I thought that the Dak one was my favorite, but I think I just switched to the Justin Herbert one. So,
and you can get both of them fairly easy in your drafts. It's not like you have to break the bank to go get Dak Prescott.
No, not at all. I think I got him in a super flex in like the 3rd round or something like that.
Wow.
Recently. I mean, people are so off on Dak that it's not even funny. But we'll have to see. This is all the fun about off-season fantasy football, is making these takes talking about our teams, about how everything shakes out. And I'm so glad that I got to talk to you about this today because if you were absent in the beginning, Brian Drake is one of my mentors, one of the first people that I worked with is in this fantasy football space. And it's just amazing to share this with him. So if people don't know, just let them know where they can find you.
So I'm on Twitter at Drake Fantasy. Don't worry about threads or any other stuff. No one's on those platforms. It doesn't matter. And check out my podcast I do with Joe Dolan called the 2 Point Stance, Fantasy Points Podcast Network. And go check out the Fantasy Points YouTube channel. I just dropped a new show, Ask Guru Anything, with the guru, John Hansen. Who now you are not just a random fan in a draft, Britt. You are an actual commentator with her own show for a major media outlet. So inside joke between you and I. But yeah, it's great to see you here. I'm so happy for your success. And yes, that is the winged eagle back there, is the guy in the chat asked about. I'm a big wrestling nerd, which, being in a basement on a random Friday, you could probably surmise.
Oh, that's so great. Drake, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you next week in Canton.
We'll be out there. Cheers. This Red Bull will be an IPA in 1 week's time. So
yes,
we'll see you then, my
my
friend.
water and Mio. Cheers is to you.
Cool.
Thank you so much. Oh man, guys, that was amazing. So we don't have too much time left, but I want to get into some of our player debates, which is our new article feature over at fantasyalarm.com. How do you weigh the good and the bad between all of these players? We've talked a little bit about players that we're in or out on through whether it's the Alarm Fantasy Show, but the truth is that you can cherry pick stats and make it a positive or negative case for so many players. If we all knew the answers to what was going to happen, we'd all be rich and we wouldn't have this wonderful game that is fantasy football. That's what we're aiming to do here over at Fantasy Alarm with our player debate series. The first article was released yesterday, and we have several more coming up to help you decide which side of the coin that you fall on. This is also a reminder or disclaimer. We do not love or hate players. We love or hate their ADP. Every player in the NFL is incredibly talented, and I can't even tie my shoes without falling over sometimes. So I'm definitely not denigrating the player and their talent. The thing about ADP is that you can't really rely on it for accurate representations of how our leagues are going to shake out. Last year, I pulled up the info for my big home league. Christian Kirk was going in the 7th. Devonta Smith was going in the 8th. And then you had people like Cam Akers and Kyle Pitts going in the 3rd. You just have to do the research before your drafts instead of just showing up and letting ADP dictate what you do. And that's what we're here to help you with. So it's easy for anyone to bet on talent, but when they're going to a new system, have a new quarterback, new coordinator, whatever the case may be, these stats may not carry over from last season. This is 2023, people. What was true last year may not be true again. We have to do a little balancing act of looking at past production and kind of using our crystal ball to assess how the situation's going to play out this year. One of my favorite examples, especially after just talking about the Philadelphia Eagles with Brian Drake, is A.J. Brown. He provided such a huge value at his ADP last season, and people were looking at him as if he still played on an offense that was one of the most run-heavy teams in the league with an aging quarterback, when in fact, he went to a team that was more than willing to incorporate him in their offense with an MVP runner-up in Jalen Hurts. Guys, let's just think Thanos. We're all about balance here. You can't completely look at these situations in a vacuum, and you definitely can't live in the past. But today, I'm stepping off my soapbox. With that said, we're going to talk about a guy who, although he has displayed talent as a wide receiver 1, this sample size has been small, and he's been out of the league for pretty much 2 years, and he's on a new team. And this guy is Calvin Ridley. So just some numbers. Ridley finished his rookie season as a low-end wide receiver 2. He was wide receiver 3 in 2019. But in 2020, he finished as the wide receiver 5 in PPR leagues. And he had almost 1,400 yards and 9 touchdowns with a pre-washed Matt Ryan. So are we looking for an upside with him at an aggregate ADP of wide receiver 17? Or is that too much risk to take? And our player debate series does an excellent job of laying out both sides. And this one in particular, written by Colby Conway and Kevin Tompkins, highlights the pros and cons of drafting Ridley here. So let's just get into it real quick. Colby tackles the pro side and he hits on Ridley's athleticism, route running ability, and career history. So in 2020, Ridley was seventh in yards per route run, seventh in targets, first in air yards, and fourth in fantasy points per game. I don't know about you, but that's somebody that I want. Now, with Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson ranked ninth in deep ball attempts last season, with Zay Jones and Marvin Jones, I think that Ridley has a great opportunity for those deep threats. But Kevin Tompkins comes in to spoil the party and says, not so fast. Kevin points out that the time off from actual NFL gameplay is a concern because practice doesn't necessarily replicate the speed of real gameplay. And there's also concern about how much of a target share that Ridley can get with a consolidated group. Last season, the receivers and Evan Ingram ran a fairly number even of routes, and we still don't know how these targets are going to be distributed. So while I tend to fall in the group that's higher on Ridley and is more than willing to draft him where he's falling to take a chance on his upside, if you're more risk averse, take Christian Kirk later. What we're trying to teach you is that it's all about balancing the risk with reward and the stats and situations with your particular style of drafting and draft strategy. And that's why it's important to not cherry pick stats. Anyone can make somebody look good or bad, but that's only part of the picture. What we're doing here, and we've told you time and time again, is that we don't want to spoon feed you stats. We want to make you better football players at fantasyalarm.com. And with this knowledge to help you, that is exactly what we are going to do. So go forth, little butterflies, and take this knowledge that I've bestowed on you and draft the championship fantasy team of your dreams. Keep an eye out for more of our player debate series as we address some more polarizing players and give you both sides of the story to, again, help you win a fantasy football championship. So that's our show, guys. It's already been an hour. What happened? This was so fast. So some final thoughts. Go follow Brian Drake. He's amazing. Make sure that you sign up for the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide. Or if you're into DFS, that little all pro package also includes the draft guide and you get a 7-day free trial. Go to fantasyalarm.com/draft for the draft guide or click on that dominate button in the upper right-hand corner and sign up for our all pro. Coming up next on the Better Sports Network, from 3 to 4, we've got the Fantasy Football Game Show from Front Yard Fantasy. From 4 to 5, we've got Better Sports Betting with Dan Servadidio and Howard Bender. And from 5 to 6, we've got the MLB DFS live stream with James Grande and John Impemba. We will see you later.